Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are and whenever you are. Welcome to Creator Toolbox. This is the series that helps you, the developers of all skill levels, put tools into your toolbox. We show you features and capabilities on the platform to make you better and more effective at what you're doing. Let's do some quick introductions before we get started. How about alphabetical?
I guess that means I go first. Hi, everybody. Andrew Barnes. I am a outbound product manager in our platform success team. And I have been working on ServiceNow for 7+ years. And my new job here at ServiceNow is helping a lot of our top customers get the most they can out of our platform. But my last job was as a developer advocate on this team here, these fine folks that I get to join today. With that, I'll hand it off to Brad.
Hey, everybody. Brad Tilton. I'm a senior developer advocate with the developer program here at ServiceNow. I've been developing on the platform for a while, and I'm excited to get into some of the Roam features today.
I'm Chuck Tomasi, Senior Developer Advocate at ServiceNow, been on the platform since about 2008, and always excited to see what's new, hear different perspectives on things that I thought I knew, and learning new things.
Hi, everyone. I'm Earl, otherwise known as New Andrew. I am a developer advocate for the team. Just started 3 weeks ago, and before that, I was a customer for a bunch of education and nonprofit sector institutions, and now I'm here. Excited for all the Roam stuff. I've been taking over the blogs for a little bit for these past few weeks.
All right, great.
New and
Thanks for the
improved,
introductions,
Andrew.
everybody. And Andrew's going to be our main presenter, so why don't you go ahead and tell him what we're up to today, Andrew?
Sure. Thanks, Chuck. So today I thought I'd come talk about some platform capabilities with you that are new in the Roam release. We'll probably touch on some things you might not have caught up with in even earlier releases, but our focus today is going to be some enhancements in the source control area of our platform for Roam. And with that, I'll go ahead and start a screen share. I've got a short presentation, and then we'll do some demos hands-on.
All right.
Because I like to be inside a ServiceNow instance because I think that's fun. So the first thing we're going to cover real quick so that we make sure we understand where these are applicable and when you can use them is we're going to cover the types of apps that you can have in ServiceNow land. And then we're going to dive into some of the enhancements that you can use on those apps. The first is going to be app customizations for plugin apps. Then after that, we're going to get into selective commits for untracked changes. And then the last thing we'll touch on is import set history as commits into source control. So let's dive right in with the types of apps. So in ServiceNow land, there are application components, and those application components are comprised of application files of many, many, many different types. I've just listed a small subsection of them here. So this is the metadata that composes your applications. Now with that, I'd like to talk about the 4 different types of application scopes you can have in our platform. Probably the most familiar one is the traditional scoped application. So this is you're in your instance and you go create a brand new application. It's going to be a scoped application. It will be prefixed with your company code. In this case, that's the X_Acme example here. That's your traditional scoped app, which gives you all of those protections between that application and other applications as you so choose. I'm going to skip over the second one and go to the third one, which is ServiceNow scopes that are inside of plugins. So this is a ServiceNow ship scope that is part of the family release directly or inside of a plugin. So some examples are the SNHR, the SNGRC. So those ServiceNow shipped scoped apps is one type of application. Another type is an ISV or ServiceNow shipped through the store app. So this is something you can go to store.servicenow.com and get and bring into your instance. Those store apps comprise that third type of application on the platform. And the last one that we're going to talk about is a very special use case, and that is the global, I call them global app bundles. Some people call them global scoped. I call them global app bundles to differentiate a little bit between how those are treated differently. And a global app bundle, what that is it's a collection of application files, so those things on the left, that are grouped together to sort of bundle them up for the purposes of using source control and the app repo with those. So that allows you to then use Studio and the capabilities that are in Studio with those application files that are in that global scope. So if you think of the IT service management suite of applications, incident, problem, change, those all, if you look at the application that those are under, it's going to say global. And what you can do is you can go into Studio and you can create one of those global app bundles and grab those application files, claim them into a global bundle, and then you can use all of the Studio-based tools on those application files. So before I go on, advocates, are there any questions about that?
No
I
questions
don't
in
see
chat.
anything at the moment.
I like how you explained the global app bundles, right? Because global is just one huge space. So you can't, we think of global apps like incident, but incident really isn't differentiated from change other than being associated with different tables. So, the bundles are really you trying to logically pull a whole bunch of files together in some way that makes sense.
I'm glad that was helpful. So with those 4 different types, now we can talk about when and how you can use those in ServiceNow and how this relates to Roam. So I'm going to skip over that. I'm sorry, I meant to hide that. So there's the history of using source control and DevOps automation on our platform. Traditionally, we just used update sets. And the Git repo was just a storage spot for you. And then some very few customers were using a thing called Team Dev. That's really, where we were at that pre-Orlando area. As we started releasing some capabilities in Orlando, we'll see that those have progressed, and they've now reached a point in Roam, which we've now covered all 4 of those app file types. So on this next slide, oh, nope, I left it out, apparently. Good job, me. So in Orlando, we covered that first scope I talked about for those capabilities. In Paris, we grabbed that global app bundling to be able to use source control and the app repo. Then in Quebec, we added the store applications. And now in Rome, we've added the 4th one, which is the app customizations for plugin based apps. So with that, once you get to Rome, you can use and leverage source control and the application repository inside of Studio for all the 4 different types of applications in the platform. So this has really completed our journey from Orlando to Rome of making that available for you to leverage source control and app repo for all the application file types on the platform so that you can manage all your development the same way in source control and app repo versus update sets. So, there's that slide. So I didn't have to do all this from memory. There it is. So I've outlined here, we talked about this already, but the different stages of adding the different app types in the different versions. And then, so I've got a quick screenshot here of, setting up linking to source control from in Studio. We'll actually see this in platform. So we'll do a little demo after we finish the presentations. But if you've used any of the other source control type options, especially if you did the store ones in Quebec, it's going to look and feel exactly the same. And that was intentional. So questions about that?
We did have a couple of questions come in. One of them is are there, I think the question is basically, are there different things that are not tracked if you're using source control than update sets, right? So data doesn't move with update sets. Is it different with source control?
That is a really excellent question, and it's almost a leading question. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is untracked changes and how that worked previous to Rome and how it's going to work forward from Rome forward. And I think that I can't actually, yeah, it's my very next slide.
Nice.
So was there a second question? And then I'll address that one.
There was, what was the other one?
It was about best practices on what should be placed into, what global files should be placed into a scope or not.
Okay, so sort of asking about when I'm creating one of those global app bundles, or just which things should be in the global scope period or not.
It seems
Yeah,
like
I'm not
Fanny
sure.
is asking if you have a scoped application, whether you should be having global files placed in that or not.
Yeah, so in a scoped application, you can't actually have any global applications inside of a scoped app. So that's a fairly hard boundary. The definition of it being inside of the scope is that that application field on that record says it's in that scope or not. So it can't be a global if it's inside of your scope app.
And I think maybe the way to answer that question would be, you can create a global app bundle and pull global files into it, and it behaves the same way or similar to a scoped app, but it is technically a global app bundle and not a scoped app.
I would agree with that as well. Thanks, Brad. So to the prior question, talking about, is source control in storing anything differently than update sets? And the short answer is yes. The longer answer is there's a feature in Rome that makes it act exactly the same if you so choose. So that's what I'm going to talk about right now, which is the selective commits for untracked changes. So in Studio, when you're using source control, you have this option called selective commit. And the thing that is presented to you is all of the sys update XML entries that were performed, modifications on since the last time you committed. Now, will you, so in Quebec, for example, if you had, I've got an example here of, I did 4 changes that I can see in my selective commit window. And if I just choose the first 2, what I expect to get stored in source control is just those first 2 objects, right? But what actually happens in Quebec and prior is I'll actually get these 4 things, right? So I'll get the 2 things I selected and the 2 cascades. And I may have even possibly expected that first cascade there, the cascading record change 1, but I definitely didn't expect cascading record change 2 to be stored in source control because I didn't choose the object that caused that cascade. So a good question now is, well, why is that? Why is source control storing something different than update sets? And the answer is the source control and application repository just works slightly differently than update sets do. And how they're deployed is slightly differently. And if that cascade, so if you deployed this via update set, the cascading record change 1 would actually happen in your instance when you deployed that update set. So you wouldn't see it in your update set, but it would cause it when that update set was deployed. When you're deploying from source control, it wouldn't cause that. So it has to be included. So we've added these options in Rome to help align the expectations from the developers to the capabilities in the platform. And in doing so, what we've done is to say, well, exclude those untracks if you so choose. So I can, at an application level, decide, and even a single commit, decide whether or not I want any of those untracked changes to make it into my source control or not. So this is a sort of an advanced topic, and we're going to see this in the instance, but I think this is new to the 3 of you. Does that make sense?
Yes. Getting back to the original question about other things that are not captured, the first one that comes to my mind is update sets do not capture things like scheduled jobs.
That is
from the
in fact
sysauto
going to be
file.
in our example.
What's that?
I said that is going to be in our example.
Oh,
But yes,
wonderful.
go ahead,
Okay, then
Chuck.
I'll shut up and let you do your thing.
So yes, there are quite a few things that are not tracked in update sets that are captured via source control and app repo. And this helps manage those expectations of a developer and help them control whether or not they want those things or not into source control. So, and I think it'll make a little bit more sense when we actually get into the demo. So let's finish these last slides and then get into the demos. So this last feature in Rome that I want to talk about is update set history as commits. So if you're unaware, when you first connect source control to a given app, what's going to happen, and there's a big angry warning on there when you do so, is it will actually go and remove all of the update sets for that scope. So it clears them all out. They're gone.
Interesting.
And so any of that history that you had of the deployments and work of that update set process and that deployment for that application have gone poof. So what we've done in Rome is we've added in a feature to store those as commits into your source control.
That's great.
And it can get a little interesting in how that's done. And I'll show you on the next slide an example of that. But one of the key things that you need to take away from this is something for you as developers to look at and see and copy things out of if you need. But it really is a history look. It is not a version history of your app in the past. So you should not be reverting to any of these commits from these update sets because that will not do what you expect. It is not the version of that app at that time from that commit. So don't do that. So set that expectation that these are for you to look at the history of an application file in source control, but it is not a version history of your application.
Are they
just
converted
because
in
it's
some
not that
specific order, Andrew? I mean, are they converted by creation date or just randomly?
They are converted by, well, in fact, let me show you. So for a given update set, it's going to have at least one commit. So every update set is going to have at least one commit. Now, the cases in which it may have more than one commit is if the individual entries in the update set, if those happen in the same timeline as another update set's timeline. So if there's some overlap between two update sets timeline of the individual app files updating, you'll get more than one commit for a same update set. So what you can see here is we've got an intermix of update set 1 and update set 2 because of the update times of those application files are overlapping. If there's no overlap, you'll only get one commit for an update set. But if you have overlap, it could be 3, 4, 5. It could be a bunch of commits because for each individual app file, we want the commit history to be in order. Does that make sense?
Yep.
We had a question in chat from Joshua. What use case or what problem does this solve, being able to track the commit history when we commit something to repo?
Yeah, so the problem this is trying to solve is when you connect to source control the first time, it clears out all your updates at history, and you're advised by that interface to export those and save them in case you need that order in history. And this makes it so that you don't need to save them off somewhere else. And you can view that history inside of source control, both historically and moving forward. So when you go open up an app file in source control, you can see both the future commits where you actually have been using source control and the historical ones where you were using update sets all in the same interface.
Yeah, I think I can imagine this as a good real world fix for something, another thing that we don't actively think about when we commit stuff to source control for the first time I mean, you're not really thinking about the history when you're doing it, you just want to get it in there. But then weeks later, someone asks, well, what order did these things happen? And you go back and go, oh man, I don't remember how any of this. Now, this solves that for historical things. It's something you don't really think about as you're doing it, but it always comes back to bite you.
Exactly. So with that, that is the end of our little PowerPoint, and we're going to drop into a ServiceNow instance now. So I'm going to quickly stop sharing, then reshare. And we'll go to a Google Chrome window. Looks mightily like not that one. How about this one? That should be a Studio Chrome window.
There we go.
Yes.
All right. So most of what we were talking about today is relevant inside of ServiceNow Studio. So I have got a application already loaded here. This is a global app bundle, I believe. And we're going to demonstrate the selective commits example first here. So the selected commits, as a reminder, that is when I'm going to, so this is already connected to source control. I've already made some changes, and I wanted to demonstrate the inclusive or exclude untracked changes capabilities. So I've got a scheduled job in here that I've modified. We can even modify it some more. We'll need to reload the form though, because the script box isn't showing. So let's remove this. Let's save that. And so what you're going to see is I've modified two things in this app, but when I go to commit, it's only going to show me one of them because only one of those has one of those sys update XML entries that would actually get stored in an update set and promoted when I was in update set land. And so if I had this option down here now, this is a brand new option. This include changes not tracked via customer update set table. So if I check this box, what will happen is that scheduled job will get included. And that is the option, or that's the how it worked in Quebec. So if you liked how it worked in Quebec and it stored that for you, then you'll want to check this box, and you can even set a property that does this by default for you. And in fact, exposing this is also controlled by a property as well. So if I check this, I will get that scheduled job committed into source control. And if I don't check that, it won't. So let's go ahead and do our commit, and we'll see that we expect to see the scheduled job. So we'll go over here to our code, and we'll drop into the main. Is this completed? It has completed. So when I drill into this application and go to the update folder, what I expect to see is sysAutoScript committed 16 seconds ago. So that was an untracked change that was stored in my source control because I chose to include that untracked change. Does that to sort of hone that in for you? And if I didn't check that, it wouldn't be stored here.
Is there any way to preview what other things would be included when you press that checkbox?
Unfortunately not. So that selective commit box really only shows you those sys update XML entries and not any of the ones that are not on that table. So that it's filtered to that table and only exposes them there. That is something that we could consider for an enhancement, but for now, it would not show you what would be committed prior to it actually committing. Does the selective commit, did that sort of hone it in? Would you like to see the opposite example of it doesn't store one of those untracks, or is that good enough?
I think that's good enough. The
right.
Yeah, we should get the properties or a link to the properties in the.
Absolutely, I can send you over the list of the properties that help toggle those controls for you. Certainly can. So the next thing I wanted to show real quick was in Quebec, as I said, we added the select store app to customize, and in Rome, that same button will now show you the ServiceNow apps from plugins. So it's all tucked into the same interface. So you would find both store apps and ServiceNow shipped apps through plugins here. And when you select them, now you can do your app customizations to that item. So I think we had a show on this in February, and it will work exactly the same. So with that, I will now switch over to showing you how the update set history committing will work. So I'm going to drop into the regular platform view. I'm going to go to the local update sets I've got here. Let's take a look at our update set 1 and update set 2. So
Great
I have
names.
got, they are really trying to hone in the ordering here. So I've got update set 1, which has got 5 entries in it, some at different times. And then I have update set 2, which has got 3 entries in it. And these update sets have overlapping timelines. So I had 2 developers that were working at roughly, the same days and times. And so there's overlapping times on these. And so the expectation is when I do the commit, I'll get more than 2 commits because they have those overlapping timelines. So let's see it work. So we're going to link to source control. I have already gotten a empty repository ready for this. I'm going to select my credentials. I will select the branch I would like this to be stored into. And one other quick note, a sneaky Roam feature right here in this interface is default email. So typically when you're doing a commit, it's going to grab the email address of the user that's doing the commit. If for some reason you don't want that, or that user doesn't have an email address, you can then select a default here. And you can also say whether or not you want it for all developers or just the developers who don't have an email address. Sneaky little Roam feature right there on the screen.
Oh, it's nice if you wanted to say send it to a team and say, oh, yep, someone on the team has made a commit.
So I want to point out this warning here that linking an application to source control deletes all of its update sets and customer update records. Export any update sets you want to preserve prior to linking. So this is that warning I was talking about earlier. And what we'll see is when we hit link to source control, we'll get a new interface that didn't show up. Okay, well, apparently my version of Roam doesn't have that. I tested this in a different instance. So there will be a new interface that comes up that just, it's an easy toggle that just asks you, do you want to store your update sets in source control? Yes or no? Well, I have been bested by my early Roam version instance, and I don't have a quick way to recover. So let's go back to looking at the slide and see if there's any further questions, since we can't actually demonstrate that quickly.
There was a question. When we do this committing of historical commits to see the order,
Yep.
does the update set name or description, or what parts of the update set are visible in the commit history so that people can track like story numbers or descriptions of what was in the update set?
Yep. And so in this box in the middle here, you actually get to see what it'll look like when it gets stored in source control. So it'll say historical commit, and then it will say the update set name. And
so is historical commit your comments box from the update set, or where does that come from?
The actual word historical commit is injected by ServiceNow.
Okay.
The number after that is if there is more than one commit for the same update set.
Gotcha.
And which order it is. So in this example here, we've got historical commit 1 for update set 1. And then we also have historical commit 2 for update set 1. And in between those, you would get historical commit 1 for update set 2.
What happens when you have
set
batched update sets?
Oh.
So batches, so it does work on batches, and it will go through those batches that roughly the same way it does for update sets. Is it will treat the batch as an update set, and it will do multiple entries for that if they have overlapping timelines or different update sets have the same application file in them. It will make sure that they put commits for those in order. Good question. So yeah, that historical commit is not configurable. They will all start with historical commit. And again, don't try and revert your application to any of those historical commits. That is not something that's supported or advised. But you should get an entry, at least minimum of one historical commit for every update set for that application. And it could be as many as it needs to form that ordered history for all your application files. And with that, I will stop the screen share.
Andrew, there was one more thing that is worth a quick mention. Delegated development, if I'm not mistaken, in Rome now supports source control too. There's a switch to say, I want to grant these people access to that source control menu in Studio.
Yes, there is. So absolutely, that is a new, there's several enhancements to delegated development in Rome, and that is one of them is adding the source control toggle, which allows you to then let delegated developers, when appropriate, use source control for any of those 4 different application file types that all support delegated development.
We had another question come in around merging branches. Can or will we be able to do that in Studio instead of just in Git?
Yeah, so right now, we're not supporting doing the merging of branching inside of Studio. And so we've considered it, and we'll likely continue considering it in the future. But for now, we feel like those Git operations should likely be done in a Git interface instead of rebuilding that inside of ServiceNow, because you can get really complicated really fast with those Git operations, and rebuilding all of that interface inside ServiceNow would be non-trivial, and there is already a good interface to go perform those actions.
And then we had another question, a good question from earlier, that the question is basically, is there such thing as too many scopes? If you have a lot of app dev teams and you want to pull things into multiple globally scoped apps, I think the question is really like, what does that kind of governance and best practice look like for app scopes, both for global bundles or your privately scoped apps? What's a good way to manage that?
Ooh, coming with the heavy hitting questions.
Right.
There. That one is the answer is, unfortunately, it depends. And it depends on what the app team structure looks like, how the apps interact, how you're shipping those apps. So the answer for an ISV who's building a store app or multiple store apps is going to be different than, a customer building them versus someone who's building apps that aren't going into the store but are going to a bunch of different customers. And then, whether you're looking at global or actual scoped apps, the answer is yes, there are cases where you can divide it up too small, and it's no longer meaningful. It's not a cohesive object that can be shipped independently. And there are cases where you can make an app that's too big, that's too unwieldy and too hard to ship versions for because it's just too large. Where that line is has dependencies on that release cycle of the app, the distribution model of the app, how many development teams are working on it. And so really there isn't a very easy, clean answer to say, other than if it feels too big, it might be too big. And if it's not atomic, if it's too atomic and you can't actually ship it independently, it's probably too small.
It depends on how much you like scrolling.
Fair point.
Yeah. Have we missed any questions? I think we hit most of the big ones. Scrolling in the chat here.
There are some questions about comments and the history and stories, best ideas for managing that, what gets imported, that kind of thing.
On the comments from the update sets, is that what you're
Well, a lot of people will track a story by, here's an update set to address this story. And if that gets imported, you're going to see that story name in that history in source control. If
Right.
it's in the comments, however, and it says, all right, this update set addresses 5 stories, is that lost?
Yeah, I do believe that that would be lost. I don't think we're storing the comments from those, but I can validate that, and we can add that into the YouTube question and the comments section afterwards. I do believe the comments would be dropped most typically because the comments are normally dropped anyway. So your comments are, unless you've done a customization, those don't automatically promote from instance to instance. And so your comment history is likely already not present because unless you've done work to customize that, which I have done previously, but that is a customization. So by default, it's not expected to be a lot of comments in those update set entries for historical purposes, because that's not the out-of-box behavior.
I see a kind of a relevant question for that checkbox that included the scheduled job that you created. What other file types are getting included on that checkbox?
I don't have a comprehensive list, but there are quite a number of things that do get stored. So any metadata where it has update sync to false is an example. Cascading changes. An example of that is where you're doing like changing the label of the table causes a cascade change. I know that there's some in flows that get captured in source control, but aren't update set entries. Anytime that the update set entry is removed. So irregardless of whether or not you have an update set entry, if you actually modify an application file, that will get captured. So the state of the app at that time is what gets captured. And so it can, the answer is there's a lot of potential untracked changes that do get stored in source control and app repo. And this gives you an option for what you're going to store in source control. I don't think I mentioned, though, publishing to the app repo is unchanged, which will capture any of those untracked changes into the app repo, irregardless of any of these settings for the selective commits. So how it worked in Quebec is exactly the same way as it works in Rome when you publish to the app repo. So it will capture those untracked changes at that time. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me on today. The one thing I'll plug is our Platform Academy. We have a sort of office hour / presentation that we do every 2 weeks over on my new team. And we do that every 2 weeks on Thursdays. And our next one is coming up this Thursday, and I'll be talking about cloning good practices.
All right. Thank you very much, Andrew. Gentlemen, any other announcements coming up?
I don't think so.
You can join us on Thursday for a live coding happy hour, and we'll be talking about playbooks.
All right. That's a good one. And with that, I think it's time to hit the music and get on out of here. So thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thanks,
Be
everybody.
safe.